Welcome to another episode of College Conversations. I am Claudia Salinas, and in today's episode, we will not only have a very special guest, but we will also be talking a little bit more in depth about what it takes to get into some of our top schools like Stanford and Harvard. So this is our premiere episode of a series that we are doing on helping you understand what it really takes to get into the top schools. I always like to introduce myself a little bit more. So prior to joining Ivy Central as a lead counselor, I spent 18 years in highly selective admissions offices across the United States. So I'm here to sort of share my perspective and expertise to help you put your best foot forward. And today, our special guest is Josie, who is also my colleague. So Josie, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jose Kumar. I'm also one of the lead counselors at Ivy Central. I founded the company with my wife, Caroline, and we've been working with students all around the world to help them get into some of the top tier universities, especially in the US and the UK. We're going to talk to you today about a lot of different profiles, especially starting with one, about what it takes to get into the top tier universities. I've been working with students for the last 10 years in figuring out how to help them bring their potential out in the things that will make them stand out as a very differentiated student, helping them figure out what do universities look for in their top tier candidates. We're going to talk about people that are really standing out from all of their peer group from various different countries. Start with a student that applied to Stanford University and applied to a lot of other universities as well. So she applied to regular decision, to many of the Ivy Leagues and so on. And she was also accepted to pretty much all of them. So we're going to take a look at her profile. So this is a profile I've taken from a few years ago, but it's going to be something we're going to discuss some newer profiles as we go along as well. So this is from 2017, so a couple of years ago. And I wanted to talk about her specifically because what I think universities are looking for did not change that much from that group of people. So it's going to be quite interesting to show you what the universities look for. I mean, Claudia obviously has been on the receiving end of our applications at Rice University and at other universities like Cornell as well. So she will give, I think, her own perspective because it's the first time she's seeing this particular profile. So we'll also check with her exactly what her perspective will be.
Definitely. And I think one of the things to keep in mind as you're going through this process is reference back to our other video. So I have a video that I've already created about the holistic review process, which is talking about the different components that we're going to dive in more deeply into today. So if it's the first time you're hearing a little bit more about the personal statement or sort of the things to consider for extracurriculars and so forth, you do want to reference our other videos so that you have a stronger foundation to work from to really understand sort of the nitty-gritty that we're going to get into today. So that's all contextualized. You can also find really great content on our website at ivycentral.com. So some of our other colleagues like Martin and Garija are also adding a lot of information into our blogs regarding these different aspects of the application for your consideration as you're starting to put your best foot forward for your application process. So without further ado, let's just dive right in, Josie. So I think that when we are beginning to talk about how to differentiate students one from another in a very competitive pool like Stanford, or if you're looking at any of the other Ivy Leagues, the first thing to keep in mind is that you've got to be a good student. So easily 90% of the pool are going to be really strong testers. They're going to be very strong students. They're probably taking very rigorous curriculums to help them prepare for the college process. So those aren't the aspects that are going to set you apart in this process. So the things that do set you apart are things like your extracurriculars. How are you spending your time over the summer, during the school year? So Josie, do you want to walk us through what your previous student had done to help her prepare for this process?
Yeah. So she's academically a brilliant student. Her SAT scores are absolutely brilliant. She has a perfect SAT score of 800 in critical reading and writing. At that moment, there was also math, of course, and her writing score was 700. So there was the 3-component score out of 2,400 at that time. So that's the year before the changeover happened to make the SAT into a 1,600 score. But her SAT subject tests were also fantastic. She has a biology test at 800, math level 2 800, literature at 740, and I think her US history score was about a 760. She did only one AP examination in a score of, and that was in Calculus BC with a score of 5. She was an IB student, so an international baccalaureate student. Claudia, do you want to tell us maybe from your angle in terms of when you see somebody applying with an IB, and I know a lot of people in the US, in Asian countries, even in Europe, a lot of people are doing now IB education rather than their local examination boards like the A levels in the UK or the normal high school curriculum in the US. Why do you think the IB stands out for university admissions? Why did you see when the applications came in? Why do you think IB students will do better at college overall?
Right. So first, I want to make sure that everyone understands that if you don't have access to a specific curriculum, the colleges and universities are not going to count that against you. You can only do what you have access to. With that said, if you do have access to a program like the International Baccalaureate, I really think there are some really great advantages to doing that program. It is a program that takes a much more holistic approach to your education. So you are studying not only areas of mathematics and science, but you're going to have some training in the humanities and the social sciences. They're going to push you to start applying your knowledge. So there's a community action service component to it. It is a curriculum designed to critically think and to really deep dive into topics and apply your knowledge. So I do think that a lot of colleges and universities do appreciate the International Baccalaureate program. But again, you need to have access to the program in order to really push it. But if you do have the choice, I would strongly encourage you to do the IB program.
Claudia, there's usually been a lot of questions regarding whether when you're doing an IB education, whether you should consider taking additional courses, things like AP examinations to prove that you can do maybe even more extensive work in different subjects. Do you think it's generally not recommended to do that? Let's say if you're doing really well in IB, you're getting a 40 out of 42 as a subject, so it's a pretty high level score. Would you want students to still showcase, well, I can do maybe a psychology test or a US history test in an AP examination? Or would you think that that's not relevant anymore because it's not part of their curriculum?
So, what I think about the IB program, what I love is that it's the same program no matter where you are in the world. So there is a very consistent standard that is practiced in the International Baccalaureate program. So when you're looking at that and it's a student who's taking several higher level courses in a specific area, that there is a high quality content behind that. With that said, if you're not feeling challenged by the IB curriculum, which I find hard to believe, but some of you are that type of student, you just eat up information, then I think it's okay to take an AP or an advanced placement class. But it's not required. It's not necessary to kind of push you into that higher level if you're already taking IB curriculum courses, because those are hard enough on their own. So it is a very rigorous program. So I usually would advise students to do one or the other and not necessarily both. At times, I do see students doing both, but I think that's more a reflection of the anxiety that students are feeling in this process. So I think it's better to kind of put your energy into the academic work that you have before you in the IB curriculum, and then focus maybe some of that other energy into other programs, other things like the extracurricular. So we'll touch upon that very soon.
One of the things that I want to bring up, even though I certainly feel, if let's say the student is doing not that well in IB, I think then taking your energies and putting into a new AP subject is going to be irrelevant, because universities want to see that you are a high achieving student and then you do well in the curriculum you're supposed to do on a daily basis. But what I have seen is universities like Stanford or the Ivy Leagues and MIT and so on, they like the fact that you extended yourself. And if you are, let's say, a good 42 out of 42 student in IB, or even if it's a 41 or 40, and then you've extended yourself and you're doing exceptionally well with scores of 5s in AP examinations, where for a lot of countries where you can take AP examinations independently, the universities love that. And most of our students who get into these top tier universities generally have done exactly that, which is that they've extended themselves when they have done well in IB. If they have not done well in IB, that means, let's say they are slightly lower on that score threshold, I always tell them, if you're below about a 38, don't do or attempt any AP examinations. If you're above 38, prepare for it. If you feel then you're going to ace your IB examinations anyway, then at that moment, do take some AP examinations and showcase the fact that you can do well in a board examination capacity as well.
The key with the AP examinations is that you're not taking the same examination as you would for the IB. So you would be exploring a new area for yourself and building a new skill set. So as an example, not all students have access to psychology, so maybe taking an IP psych course, or environmental science is another area where not all students have access to that in the IB program or in their home program. If you're doing a national curriculum, that you would want to stretch into some AP coursework in that regard. So that's seen as favorable, but you have to be successful in your original curriculum. If you're not successful in your original curriculum, stretching yourself to a new level is not really stretch. You're just really stressing yourself out. You have to have good foundation to start from.
Now, there is an exception to that. So let's say if you're doing a local high school curriculum, let's say as a country like India, where we have a lot of students that we work with, if you're doing something like CBSE, Central Board of Secondary Education, or ICSE or ISC, generally those curriculums are not at same par with IB. For those curriculums in particular, I think it makes great sense to do AP examinations and showcase your skill sets to be at that higher university level, credit level place. So if you are doing a CBSE curriculum or ISC curriculum or A levels, for example, you may want to then extend yourself a lot more. With IB, it's not entirely necessary. It is helpful if you are the high achieving student and then you want to showcase yourself as a really brilliant candidate. Overall, I would say it really comes down to that year and how we feel about the entire competitive group and how well you're coming across in different ways. If, let's say, extracurricular wise, you're spending an extraordinary amount of time doing something really fabulous that is going to really stand out, and we're going to discuss that next, then I think maybe doing the extra work in academics probably will not add that much value. There are some schools which I think value academics a lot more. So they want to see that you've stretched yourself beyond your curriculum. And there's some schools which will say they'll value a lot more your innovation or your entrepreneurship skills or your ability to do something extraordinary for other people. And they will give you more valuation from that perspective when they're assessing the application. I think it really depends from school to school. One of the key things that we like about Stanford is that they are very focused on innovation. Obviously, it's a very entrepreneurial, innovative focused or innovation focused university. And all the students in the last few years, and we generally get at least one or more students a year into Stanford, and all the students generally have shown some key areas of innovation. And I'm going to maybe give you some examples of that today. One of the key things that we do emphasize, and that's something that I would, if at all possible, I would encourage people to do. If possible, go for a competitive summer school, which will test your abilities in research or test your abilities to do academic work on a college level. So you might get college credits, for example, the work you're doing. I really like some of the programs in the US, which are research focused. There's a lot of programs like RMP, SARA, or now it's called SRA. There is RABS, REBS, BU RISE. There's SSP, Summer Science Program. These are, and things like SUMAC for mathematics and stuff like that. They're absolutely brilliant programs. We generally win for our students many of these programs every year, and it makes the students stand out when they are applying to colleges. These programs are highly selective. That means their selection rate usually is anything from under 10% to maybe about 20% of all the candidates that apply to it. And I think it showcases to the universities that generally that you have not spent your summer doing absolutely nothing, playing games and, watching TV and Netflix and so on, but rather that you have been engaged with something that's a bit more going to stretch you, but also is going to prepare you better for college. If you're doing a research program in the summer, you are going to showcase the fact that you are ready for research when you get into college, and you're more likely to contribute in that way, and that you're going to be academically focused. Claudia, when you were, looking at university applications and so on, how did you see the students who have done these competitive programs? Did you give them a purple flag or, some kind of status that this is something that's going to stand out? Or how would you have dealt with it?
So we definitely are looking closely to see what students are doing. When you're looking at a highly selective process like a Stanford, like a Rice, you're really looking at students who are already accustomed to pushing themselves. So you want to know, where is that next growth level for them? how are they continuing to be curious? How are they exploring that curiosity? And so these programs are definitely an expression of that curiosity. So it's usually seen very favorably for you to participate in these summer programs. I think a lot of students get a lot of great experiences from them because many are hosted on college campuses. So you're getting the exposure of what life is like on the campuses, as well as starting to sort of interact with students who are at that higher level of thinking. I think for a lot of students, it's probably the first time they've interacted with somebody who's at their same level, that is challenging them with questions, really forcing them to kind of defend their positions for the first time. And I think that kind of growth is really important in this process. So it really helps you to stand out. So definitely colleges and universities make note of it in your application process when it's being reviewed. It just depends on what school you're applying to. It could be a flag, it could be a happy little gold star that you get on your application for doing well in those regards. But it's also showing that you're participating in a bigger community, and which is something that I return to time and time again in the holistic review videos about community. So those are all aspects that I think are really important. So Josie, what are you seeing from your side, having worked more closely with students over the last few years in terms of their high school perspective and development? What are you seeing that students are getting from this program?
So one of the things that, and it's a good question, because one of the things that I saw about students who go to for example, this is especially for international students coming from different countries. If they go to the US, they get to understand more about the way the US university system works. They get to understand the culture a lot more. They integrate a bit better with it. So by the time they're applying to universities, I think they're better prepared for that university environment itself. Because when they come there, they know, well, I know what this kind of university is. Obviously, if you go to a program that is run by a university itself, I wouldn't say it will necessarily carry a lot of favor with that university automatically. But if you've done a really great job, and let's say if the program director or the mentor you had, does an exceptionally well recommendation for you, I think it's going to really play well for the students. So when students go to these kind of programs, like this lady, for example, went to the research mentorship program at University of California in Santa Barbara. She did work on stem cell therapy for six weeks while she was there. Obviously, she is a very biology-focused student, and it helped her prepare an extensive research paper that she could then showcase to the university she was applying for. And not only that, she got a brilliant recommendation, hopefully, because she did really well at the program, from the program director there. So I think that really helped her with all of her applications to universities. I think that kind of stuff is important. When you go there, you want to impress the individuals that are going to be working with you as well, not just do well academically, but showcase the fact of what kind of individual you are, how you're going to interact with everybody, how you're going to participate in the classroom environment. I think those things are very important. But I think for international students, I think the more summer schools you do, I think the more it helps, because it allows the universities to really understand that you are well integrated in understanding the different culture that you're going to be faced with. Students who have never done summer schools, they also get into Stanford. They also go into some really great universities as well. But I think for a lot of cases, I think the individuals that are reading the applications may actually think culturally, how well are they going to be adapting to their school, the university that they're applying for. So I think that's going to be maybe a key area of concern for some people. Is that something, Claudia? I don't know if you ever came across that, if there's a person applying from, let's say, a brand new international country that you've not seen students from, would you consider aspects like things like the fit into the university? And which aspect of that fit would you think would be appropriate for you to look at?
Fit is such a great question. I mean, we're really talking about the campus culture and the university priorities there. There are so many things that schools are taking into consideration as they are putting together that community. Because again, as an admissions representative, you really have an opportunity to craft and create the community that you want. And you can really cherry pick from a really high quality pool like Stanford to introduce those people to one another. So the more experiences that you have interacting with other people, interacting, in particular the summer programs, interacting on a university campus, so you're engaging in intellectual growth, is a really positive thing. Plus, the US is a little bit wacky. We're a different kind of place. And so I think understanding some of our cultural pieces that are a little strange is always a positive thing that we're more upfront in our classroom environment. We expect students to actually engage in the classroom discussion. It's okay to ask difficult questions to your faculty for consideration. It's showing that you're critically thinking. And I think in a lot of places around the world, those are all pieces that are kind of frowned upon. And that's really we really own that in the United States as part of our learning process. So I definitely think that that's an important piece. The other piece with these summer programs that we haven't quite touched upon is that many of you are exploring your academic interest. Maybe you're thinking you're going to be a biologist. Maybe you're thinking you're a computer scientist. But how do you really know unless you've gone out there and you've really started to explore those areas more deeply? And when you're getting involved with these summer programs, you're showing the university your willingness to explore these academic areas. So I think that's an important piece. As I mentioned before, that community is a big piece. So you can't be academic all the time. I hope you do have friends. I hope you do blow off steam with a little bit of Netflix here and there. But Josie, what have you seen from students in your experience that is setting them apart? What kinds of non-academic activities are you seeing them doing?
I mean, there's a lot of things to do with sports. I think, Stanford is a big sports school from that perspective, showcasing the fact that you could be at a national or international level sports athlete could be really useful. This lady we're talking about loves to do taekwondo, and she also does kummuye. And it is something that I think makes her stand out. She was, I think in her country, she was one of the first female instructors who got the necessary qualifications to become a kummuye instructor. And kummuye is an ancient Korean martial art form of swordsmanship. So these are the type of things that I think really stand out for universities. If you have done something that's one of a kind or something that's going to be very differentiating in your application, doing all the same kind of activities that every other student does, that means you need to then be really good at that activity almost at an international level. But being one of the first ones to do something unique, I think that actually stands out really well. Our focus is always to help students really figure out what is that unique thing going to be, and how are you going to differentiate yourself? It's impossible to say that no other student in the world does kummuye, for example, but it's pretty sure that, in most states or most countries, that you might be one of the first ones to do it. So it's a pretty good, interesting thing. If you want to try out something quite unique and new, maybe kummuye is the one to go for. Apart from that, she does a lot of taekwondo. She's a 3rd degree black belt, or she was at least at that time. I think at this point in time, she's way into her graduation after college, and therefore she's able to probably be at a much higher level. So Stanford does have a taekwondo club. So she did a lot of research on finding out how she can continue working towards her taekwondo black belts and the other things that she needs to do on top of that in the future.
I think one of the things that was so key that you said, Josie, was that, you've got to do things to a high level if it's very common. So for example, we have a lot of students from India, from China, where badminton is like the sport. Everybody wants to play badminton. Badminton's very competitive in that part of the world. But if everyone is doing it, then it doesn't set you apart. So I think that's important for people to digest. So if you're going to put badminton as one of the activities that you do, you've got to be like national, international level. So I really want to emphasize that, because just simply being part of badminton is good. It's great for your health. It's fun, but it's not going to be the thing that sets you apart in your application, which means you have to be involved with something else that is differentiating. So it's not that you have to keep adding extra. It's about thinking about the quality of the things that you are doing currently to help prepare you for those highly, highly selective places that are looking for people who are doing things off the beaten path. So that's one point that I really wanted to emphasize to students.
Well, that's a very good point. And one thing I do want to emphasize as well, don't think you need to fill up all 10 of your activities to make yourself stand out. You don't need to do that. You need to showcase that, the amount of time you spend on one activity in particular is substantial. If you have maybe 3 or 4 activities where it's substantial, you've done it over the years, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades, that's fantastic. And that will maybe stand out a lot more than showcasing maybe 10 activities and then writing more about it and showcasing that you've taken activities that don't really make sense. If you just play badminton for fun, you don't need to necessarily make it as an activity because you're not competitive in that. And there's just too many students who are doing the same thing. So you want to put things in there that you feel that you've established yourself as really someone who's going to stand out with that activity as much as possible. So I would suggest focus on putting only those activities that you feel that you really want to. because you're going to stand out with it. One of the things that Stanford really looks for, and I presume they do, is, and most of our students who get into Stanford do that very well and very effectively, is innovation. I think, Stanford is a very innovative school itself. They have so many people coming out of it doing startups and things like that, coming up with some brilliant ideas to solve problems for the world. A lot of our students think, well, I don't have any skill sets yet, but how can I make myself innovative, or how can I do something that's going to stand out? You don't need to make yourself an application like, Mark Zuckerberg made Facebook that's going to millions of followers, or things like that. You don't need to necessarily do that. You need to find something that's going to help a group of people. It could even help just one or two people, but it has to be something that's going to help them in some particular way. And it's an innovative new way of doing it. So this lady, for example, she was looking at how to develop an automated blood typing technique. So it's basically using smartphones to look at a blood sample, using something also quite innovative, not the smartphone aspect of it, but actually looking at something on how it changes color when blood is applied to it. And with that whole chemical process taking place, then using images from the camera to pick up basically what blood type you are. So her application was presented in an international conference. She was able to demonstrate the fact that she is doing something quite extraordinary from that perspective. But she already had that background and the knowledge, and she was working with a company's lab who were working within that domain, but not necessarily using the technology like the app to help make those things apps. So her real focus was just the application, not how the whole fabric makes it. The entire focus of that was to reduce the cost of blood typing, especially in developing nations. Cost becomes a very big factor. I mean, there's a lot of blood typing solutions available in the world, but they cost money when you run it. And when you have to run it for, a few million people, that becomes a very costly endeavor. So you want to make it as cost effective as possible. COVID is currently everywhere. We want to make the cost of checking COVID as low as possible. So countries which don't have that much money and that much capability would be able to do something about it. So in a similar way, you want to do something which is going to bring your cost per use of whatever application you have, whatever innovation you have, as low as possible, so that the vast majority of this world can do it. I think for students, especially in the US, for example, finding solutions that will help developing nations or third world nations improve their healthcare or improve the way they work, or about their safety, for example. You can build a lot of different applications that help you do that. And that's the innovation I think schools like Stanford are looking for. And I think that similarly works for the Ivy Leagues and so on. It shows your intellectual curiosity in terms of what you want to showcase as a tool that is really helping people, or that has the ability or the potential to help a lot of people. A lot of our students generally have prototypes. They don't necessarily have tools which are out there in the public domain. They have prototypes. And those prototypes sometimes really work out well for getting them into college, because they're demonstrating that curiosity of finding a solution for a problem that they've clearly identified and requires a solution. And we really try to get all our students to do a lot of thinking around that. That's a very important thing to do. Similarly, she has worked with a couple of national institutes to work in, for example, in biological research and so on. And apart from that, I think she has done some really interesting work in relation to things like Taekwondo, right? So one of the things that she has done is actually taking her understanding of Taekwondo, and she's helped girls in her country who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds learn how to do Taekwondo for self-defense. So it's a very unique way of then using a skill set you have gained and then helping others to benefit from it, but from a safety point of view, for example, right? Obviously, Taekwondo is a sport, but who would have thought that perhaps it can be used as a safety mechanism, but to teach other people on how to do that. So I think she has taken it from that perspective and made it even stand out even better.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know. So what you're seeing here as a theme, whether you're approaching this from a project point of view because you have an idea to problem solve something in the science realm, or if you're looking at things that you're currently a part of because you just enjoy them, in her case, it was Taekwondo, it's how are you sharing that with others? Again, going back to the community building piece, they want to, places like Stanford that have a plethora of applications to choose from are looking to see how are you sharing that piece of yourself with other people in your community, because their hope is that you're going to share that piece on their community as well and have that kind of positive impact. And so that was really important for this student that we see here is that she's going back and she's teaching what she's learned to others, especially a group that doesn't necessarily have the means or the resources to learn those kinds of skills on their own.
I think one of the key things about her application is she started doing all this work really early on in her 9th grade and even earlier than that. So by the time she was reaching grade 12, she's got so many things that are going for her, and she's done really a fantastic job at making all this happen. Students who start late in the whole process, basically, by the time they're reaching grade 11 or 12, they can still make things happen, but they have to pack in so much more content in their final 2 years of high school. And that becomes a bit more problematic, even though we've seen that happen. We have had lots of students who've gone into some terrific schools like MIT or Caltech, but they only worked really hard on making that whole application profile happen in the last maybe few months or up to maybe a year before the application was due. It is still possible. It just requires so much more work. If you do it consistently over the period of the 3 years or 3.5 years before you apply to college, I think you are well established and in a lot better place to then make yourself stand out for the colleges. Stanford is a very difficult school to get into. We are very fortunate some of our students get in there every year, but it requires a lot of work. Now, one of the key things that I will also mention is, let's say academically you're good. And you don't have to be, by the way, Stanford doesn't need you to be only the top tier student. This student particularly had scores of 800, 800, 700 in her 3 components. We've had students who have had scores of maybe 1500, 1480, and still gone into Stanford. So they have a range of scores that they want to consider. Obviously, everybody knows that you don't need to be on the top end of a score. So I think just running or chasing that score is not important. If you have scored a great score and it's on your first sitting, leave that score as it is. You don't need to then spend another 100 hours, 200 hours practicing to take that test again and then try to get a slightly higher score. I think that's a waste of time. You probably would want to use that time more productively. Do something more with your time as part of your activities and so on. Put more time in one of your activities. That'll actually make it stand out a lot more. One of the other things that I think obviously works really well for our students is the essays they write. Essay writing here is, I would say, is a very important thing. Claudia, when you read essays from applicants, when you see the application for the first time, what does an application essay do to you? Whether you want to throw that person into the bin or say that this is the person I really want to get to know, what would you do with it?
Yeah, well, first, like the personal essay is an aspect that you as the student can control 100%. You're choosing the words, you're choosing the topics. And so you have a lot of power in what you're writing in that essay. And because of that, colleges and universities are really paying attention to what you are saying. It's not only about understanding whether or not you are able to write. That's not the key. You should know how to write. You're applying to these top schools, so the expectation is already there. But it's what you're choosing to share about yourself. I think a lot of admissions professionals, a lot of my colleagues from my former life in admissions, love the essay because it really helps to set you apart from everybody else. It helps to bring in your personality. It helps to know what is important about you to know. And I think all of that can help you stand out in this process. I have really seen essays, if you're not able to do the differentiation in the extracurriculars, ideally you'd want extracurriculars plus differentiation in the essays. The essays can really help provide the context for you in so many ways. So we're always excited to read essays, but we're always a little bit hesitant because some students just don't put in the effort and it's apparent. And, if you're not going to take the essay seriously, then why should an admissions person take you seriously? Trying to do it at the last minute typically doesn't work. I can't tell you the number of times I just kind of eye rolled and was like, I really wish they had shared something different or something more and put more thought into it because it's a process. So for this student in particular, I think, part of the success in her application to Stanford is that you can see that it's a thoughtful essay. You can see that there was some critical thinking behind that. This is clearly not a first go. This is not a last minute procrastination essay where the student is just like, I'm going to do this 1 hour before the deadline and then submit it. Quality writing usually takes some time and the student planned for it. So Josie, do you want to kind of introduce us into the essay that's presented here?
I think readability is a very important element, how well it reads through the essay. If you know how to play with the words in the essay and make it beautiful in the way you're writing, regardless of what the topic is about, I think people would love to read the essay and they will see the creative genius in your ability to write. And I think that's something that you should bring out if you have the capability. I would say out of maybe the last 10 students we've gotten into Stanford, I would say maybe about 6 of them had that creative ability where they could write beautiful essays. And that creative ability comes on through the paper. And no matter what they're describing, it would be really fantastic. And I think that actually plays a big role in you getting accepted to a particular school. We generally try to help students think about what they want to write about. Identity essays are very important. So I think writing about something and how you have become that individual and so on could be really good. Intellectual challenges essay are fantastic, especially they work really well so describe a problem you've solved or a problem you like to solve. I focus on the earlier part, you've solved rather than something you want to solve. That essay generally does really well for schools like Stanford, Caltech, all the tech schools, I think Georgia Tech and things like that. I think it really works out well for those essays. Not that it will not work for things like Columbia or Brown or Princeton, it would. But I think especially for these kind of schools, they want to see that you've taken a problem and you've tried to find a way to solve it. And you have maybe, you've solved it in your own little way. And that it shows them your capability, which is your potential, which is that one day you will be at their university and you would have so much more experience of understanding how the higher level thing works. You have all of the smartest people around you. You have great professors who can mentor you. And one day you will find a bigger problem to solve. I think that's what their intentions are when they see you solving maybe an easier problem. So this lady talks about the blood typing app. And that's the thing that she talks about in her essay in terms of how she came up with it and the idea behind it and how it works and what is the efficiency of that app. It's not a technical essay. It's all just beautifully written. So I think that works out really well. Essays take time to work on. We generally start, we generally ask our students to start working on essays as early as June, but we start preparing them for the essay writing process years ahead. Learning how to write well for college is an important skill set. It's not academic writing. It's slightly different. It's a way you are portraying your message to the person who's going to be reading it. I don't think it should be written as an academic essay that you're writing for school. It should be written almost like I'm talking to you right now, write those words in. I think that's how it needs to be taken as much as possible. The readability is the important part, one thing. The way, and if you can make it beautiful, that's really good. Don't make it too technical. I think nobody wants to see a technical explanation because the people who are reading there might not be technically apted. So they might not have that understanding of what you're talking about. So writing some mathematical formulas in there and stuff may actually not work out at all. I think you want to be very careful with things, especially for students who apply for engineering, mathematics, sciences. They seem to go a bit more technical in their essay. And I think that's something that you want to try to avoid as much as possible. Don't make it too
avoid
technical.
it completely. That's a very common thing that I see engineers, computer scientists do, rather than showing more about yourself. That's for an admissions person. What that is that you're just showcasing something that's not you. Your Lego essay. That's like the most common I've seen. It's like, I love to build Legos. I fell in love with engineering because of Legos or Connects or some other engineering-esque toy. And I'm like, that tells me nothing about you. Dive deeper, okay? Dive deeper. And I've talked about a little bit of this. So if you want to see more content in the personal essay YouTube video that we've also created.
And I think the one thing I would say about essays also is try to avoid writing about other people, right? I mean, there's so many essays that I've read, thousands of them, where it starts with writing about, your mom, your dad, your uncle, your friend, and half the essay is all about them. Nobody wants to know about them. They're not trying to get into college. You are. The essay, if you're going to put an aspect of somebody else into the essay, maybe one paragraph, that too, maybe 3 lines. After that needs to really very fast come into you and start talking about you. So you're going to talk about yourself. I think try to avoid doing those kind of things because that really gets the essays really, I wouldn't say that they are really bad essays, but they just don't bring out your personality. They don't bring out what you're talking about. They don't bring out what solution you've produced. These people who are reading these essays in the application, they're reading hundreds and thousands of essays, right? Not hundreds of thousands, hundreds and thousands of essays, every time. So they want to read these things and they want to just get a feel for you very quickly. If an essay requires 2 reads or 3 reads to understand what you're trying to make of it, that's not going to work either. That readability element is the more important thing. You want to be able to read it once and saying, I understood everything that this person is trying to tell me, and I love that. I think that's what you're trying to really showcase there. Claudia, how do you generally feel about essays? Do you ever read essay twice, and or do you think if the first one didn't work out, you basically, I know halfway through some essays you just drop out and you say, kill me now, right?
Yeah, it's a little tough. Really emphasizing your point about readability, it's super important. If you give your essay to a friend and they read it and they don't understand it at the first go, then you need to rewrite it. Admissions professionals, given the volume they receive, think about how many applications there are to Stanford. Does that team really have the time to read your essay multiple times? They really don't. So if it's not something that is cohesive, if it doesn't make sense, they don't have time to go through and try to figure it out. They're simply going to say that this is not an effective essay, that I'm not learning more about the student, it's not added value to the application, and now you've missed your opportunity to kind of present yourself. So make sure that you really are, because yes, if it's hard to read, people will check out. There's so many more other students who are going to put in the time to the essay that it's not necessary to spend time on yours if it doesn't make sense.
I think we will certainly do a follow-up session in which we will talk about how to construct your essay and what are the things that you should look out for. So we're going to do maybe a more detailed analysis of the essays that got some students into the top tier universities. I think this is what we wanted to bring out in terms of the students that stood out. And so this student obviously stood out that year, got into Stanford and a lot of other schools. I'm sure, there are students who are totally different than her that have also got into the colleges. And we're going to look at maybe other profiles as well. So we're going to do another Stanford profile, I think, in one of our next sessions. But I think next time when we are talking, and that's going to be, hopefully, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're going to be talking about Harvard and how one of our students is going to Harvard in 2020. So we will talk about how different that profile is compared to this one. She has done the total opposite of that. Nothing academic, at least from a perspective of this, but something at a very high level on an international stage that she actually stood out for. Her extracurriculars were absolutely outstanding. So we're going to talk about that application next. And then we're going to talk about Princeton, and we're going to talk about Columbia and Brown and how those applications also stood out. So these are completely new sessions for us. We're trying to bring up ideas for students so that they are better prepared for it. I think just listening to someone talk about their application is sometimes not enough. I think you need to understand what's going behind each of those things and why it's making sense. Next time, we're going to also talk about how you should hopefully influence your counselors and your teachers to write the best recommendation for you. Yes, they can be influenced just like anybody else in the world. You just need to make sure that you produce the right amount of content for them and they understand what you've achieved over the course of the 3.5 years in high school before they ended up applying, sending recommendations on your behalf. So how to do that is something that we will also talk about. Claudia, is there anything else you want to say about today?
So for us, it's stay tuned for more videos. Clearly, we're going to be exploring all these different profiles. And I hope what you see is that there is a difference in where you apply to. Different schools are looking for different things. And I'm hoping that message is also resonating with you as students, that it's very unusual for a student to get in everywhere. The other piece to that is, feel free to leave a comment and let us know if this is helpful for you or if there's other areas you'd like us to emphasize on. We're, as we said, we're developing these different series. And so we're happy to try to address your needs more as students. So if you want us to cover a different aspect, we're happy to do that. So leave us some comments, subscribe to our series. And with that, that's been another episode of College Conversations.